Who was Lucinda Garcia?
Lucinda Garcia was a descendant of the Palomares family of Pomona. Lucinda's middle name was Valentine. I don't know that she ever used it, but it was her given middle name. At first I wasn't quite sure why, and then I looked up her birth date. She was born on February 14th, probably in 1880 or 1881. She married, started a family, and they moved to Monrovia probably about 1908 or 1909. Her husband's name was Louis or Luis. It appears, I believe, both ways in the early directories. They lived on East Maple, several addresses, but her home, her last home, is still in family ownership and lived in by, I believe, a great-great-grandson or a great-grandson. Several years ago, Tom Adams was seeking to rename a park honoring the Hispanic tradition in our community. So he asked me to think of some possible suggestions for names. Then he reached out to the Hispanic community, and they came up with the name of Lucinda Garcia. Not a name I was real familiar with, but then I did some reading, both on my own and material that was provided, and I realized that Lucinda was significant because she challenged the hierarchy, and not only the hierarchy of her time, but the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. The reason was this: Immaculate Conception Church, founded in 1903 and housed in a structure that was built and completed about 1906, was largely made up of Italian, Irish, and Hispanic families. And the parish priest, either by his own decision or by a pattern that had already been established, said that the Hispanic members of the congregation had to sit in the rear of the church. This rubbed Lucinda the wrong way, big time. And she challenged the priest and said, "This is not right. We should not be segregated. We should sit in church wherever we want to sit." And she prevailed. So that was one aspect of Lucinda's personality. She had strong convictions and she was assertive. Another aspect was her maternal side. Lucinda was wonderful about welcoming new Hispanic members of the community, making sure that they were felt welcomed, that they were introduced around and made known to the other members of the community, and also acquainted with the resources that were available in the community. For that reason, she was sort of the mama of the Hispanic community, the matriarch who was looked up to because of her, well, number one, her mature years, her leadership role, and her desire to help people assimilate and be supported by their new community. Lucinda, I can't tell you how many children Lucinda had, perhaps 8, but her grandchildren and great-grandchildren are still in the area. And interestingly enough, her great-grandson, Henry Olivas, was recently selected to serve on the committee that's attempting to assess any layers of racism that still remain within the community and to make recommendations about how to eliminate those and make our community even more equitable than it is today. So Lucinda's heritage begun well over 100 years ago in terms of this integration, assimilation, lack of racial prejudice continues to the present time. No, as an addendum, the park, Lucinda's name was selected for naming what had previously been Olive Park. So now we have in the western part of Monrovia, Lucinda Garcia Park. It's interesting that the park was formerly the Pacific Electric right-of-way. Not all of it, but part of it still serves as a reminder because it's in a section of Monrovia where Olive Avenue was divided into two streets with the right-of-way in the center. You'd look at that and think, well, why is that? Well, the reason is quite because the Pacific Electric needed a right-of-way, and that part of Monrovia was sufficiently undeveloped that they could take and then designate two streets, a northbound and a westbound, on either side of the right-of-way. Also interesting because the Pacific Electric passed not too far from Lucinda's home on East Maple, north on Olive. The other aspect is, number one, it was unusual for a priest in the Catholic Church to be challenged on any issue, but even more unusual that it was a woman who took it upon herself to challenge the status quo and say to a male priest, this is not right, this needs to change. And apparently, I hadn't heard this, but Sandy did, that it was her husband, Lewis, who first commented on being told where he needed to sit and being, taking offense, but not being willing to speak up. But Lucinda was not daunted. She knew that it was not right, and she also had the conviction as a woman to challenge a parish priest, something that did not happen in the Catholic Church in the early 1900s.